Hey everyone, it's Patrick from Patrick and Friends Music Company, and today we're going to talk about how to learn chord progressions. So in our previous beginner guitar chord videos, we've been breaking down chords individually and by themselves, but today we're going to talk about how to switch between these chords just like you would when you're learning or playing a song. So if there's a chord that you haven't heard of or haven't learned yet, make sure you check out our other videos where we'll learn these chords individually and talk about tips and techniques to get them down. All right, let's zoom in and get right to it. Now, the term chord progression refers to a series of chords in a specific order. And because most songs use more than one chord, it's a necessity to learn how to get down chord progressions. Now, the chord progression we're going to be talking about today is G major, E minor, C major, and D major. This is actually a really famous chord progression. It's also called the 1-6-4-5 chord progression. And it's actually used in a bunch of different songs in a bunch of different order. So you'll hear the chord progression in this exact order, but also people will mix up the order of the chords and still use all four of these chords. There's actually a song called the 4-Chord Song that uses a mashup of a bunch of different popular songs using these 4 chords. It's called the 4-Chord Song. I'll link it in the description below. There's a 4-step process I like to teach to get down your chord progressions. And the first step is to get your chords down individually and confidently. Now, this is so important because if you don't have your chords down by themselves, switching between them and switching to them will be just that much harder. So make sure you have your chords down and make sure you can play them really, really well. Now, the second step is going to be playing the chords, switching between them without a strumming pattern. So just play the chord, hold it, take your time, and switch between them. Now, the next step after that is you're going to start adding a strumming pattern, but you're going to give yourself time to switch between the chords. And finally, what you're going to do is play your strumming pattern with the chords and play it all in time. All right, so let's talk about that second step. So what you're going to do is set up your chords. So remember, we have G major, E minor, C major, and D major. So what we're going to do is we're going to play one chord, hold it out, take your time, and get to the next chord. Do this for all 4 chords, and we're going to wind up back at G major. So ready? Start with your G major. Hold it out, now go to your E minor. Hold it out, now go to your C major. Hold it out, and then go to your D major. Hold it out, and finally go back to your G. Great, now take your time to switch. However long it takes you, doesn't matter. This is just working on getting the individual switching down with your fingers. Now, if you're having trouble with this right away, I suggest, just putting one finger down at a time. So if you need to just go one finger at a time, that's totally fine. Just work on it however you can to get these chords switching down cleanly. Now, it still may be difficult, so we're going to talk about a couple techniques to help you switch between chords. The first technique is to move your fingers as little as possible. And in order to do this, we have to find common notes and fingers between the chords. So let's look at our first 2 chords. We have G major, and then we have E minor. So if you actually noticed, our index finger, I actually didn't move it, right? I didn't lift it off and put it back on again. And that's because the second fret of the A string with your index finger is actually common between the 2 chords. So that means we don't have to lift up our index finger at all. This will help you move between your chords quicker, and it'll just help you have a more efficient switch. Now, if you play your E minor chord with your middle and ring fingers like this, that's actually okay. You can still switch between them, but obviously you can't use this technique. But again, this is why I kind of advocate for learning alternate fingerings to chords, because when it comes to chord progressions, it can be a lot easier to switch between chords if you know multiple fingerings for different chords, and you can try to use the one that's easiest for you. All right, so let's take a look at our second switch. So we're going to go from E minor to C major. And again, we have our middle finger on the second fret of the D string that's common between both chords. That means that when you switch, you don't need to lift your fingers up between them. So all you need to do, right, is leave that middle finger down, take your index finger, go to the first fret of the B string, and then put your ring finger down on the 3rd fret of the A string. So remember, we're trying to get as little movement as possible with our fingers, but again, if you need to put one finger down at a time, that's okay. And then we get a little more advanced, you can start to put multiple fingers down. All right, so let's look at our second switch. So we're going from C major to D major. All right, so as you notice, we don't actually have any common fingers between these chords. We can't leave anything down. So let's talk about a second technique to switching between chords. Now, this is a technique so that when you first start off learning chord progressions that you can use. This is not something that you would use when you get a song down and are playing with other people, because this takes a little time. This is just when you're first learning. So what we're gonna do is think through our switches. So what I mean is you're gonna set up your chord, so C major, and you're gonna think about where each finger is gonna go. So my ring finger is gonna move to the 3rd fret of our B string. My middle finger is gonna move to the 2nd fret of the high E string. And my index finger is gonna move to the 2nd fret of the G string. Right, so I wanna think about those switches and move my fingers. And again, in the beginning, move them one finger at a time, but then what you can still do is think through your switches. So look at your chord, visualize it, visualize where your finger is gonna go, and then switch them all at one time. This will just really help you sort of get your chord switching down cleaner, because you can kind of understand where each finger is gonna go, and you can almost anticipate where each finger is gonna go for your new chord. Okay, so now we're at our D major, and we wanna go back to our first chord, G major. Again, no common fingers between them, so think through your switches. My index finger is gonna go to the 2nd fret of the A string. My ring finger is gonna go to the 3rd fret of the high E string, and my middle finger is gonna go all the way to the 3rd fret of the low E string. Now I will say there's an alternate G major fingering you can use, where you can leave your ring finger down and add your pinky, but we haven't really talked about that in our other chord videos, so I'll include that chord chart in our lesson recap PDF in the description below. All right, so once you got your chord switching down and you feel comfortable switching between these chords without a strumming pattern, then you start adding your strumming pattern. So I want to make sure that you use a very simple strumming pattern when you first start off, because if you try to use a very complicated strumming pattern, you're gonna have to think about the strumming pattern and the switching, and it can overwhelm you, and focusing on two things will just make it a little bit harder for you. So in this, we're gonna use a pretty simple strumming pattern, but you can use any one that's easy for you. So it's going to be down, down, up, down, or 1, 2, and 3, 4. What we're gonna do is just mute our strings and loop the pattern to get used to it. Ready? Down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, 1, 2, and 3, 4, down, down, up, down. Awesome. So what we're gonna do now is add the strumming pattern to each chord. But we're actually gonna give ourselves extra time to switch. So we're not actually gonna play the strumming pattern in time. So what you're gonna do, set up your first chord, do your strumming pattern. Give yourself time, get your next chord down, then do the strumming pattern on that chord. Okay, so we're not worrying about getting in time. This is not really a in the song sort of switch. This is just working on the strumming pattern and the switching. Okay, so now we're gonna play our strumming pattern at a time, switching between the chords. Ready? Down, down, up, down. Switch to your E minor chord now. Down, down, up, down. Hold it out, switch to your C major chord. Down, down, up, down. Hold it out, switch to your D major chord now. Down, down, up, down. Hold it out, and finally back to your G major. Down, down, up, down. Now, if you really do want to play at a time, you really just want to practice that, a quick tip I have is to give yourself 4 extra beats. So what you do is play your strumming pattern, down, down, up, down, and give yourself 1, 2, 3, 4, and switch. Down, up, down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Switch. Down, down, up, down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Switch. Down, down, up, down. 1, 2, 3, 4, and back. This is gonna be a helpful tip if you really just want to play your pattern in time. Okay, so the last step, once you get all this down, is to play your strumming pattern in time with your chord progression. Okay, so we're gonna give ourselves a 4-beat count off and try switching between our chords with our strumming pattern in time. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome. If you really enjoyed this video and our other videos on Patrick and Friends Music Company channel, make sure you check out our Patreon page for exclusive content that's not available on YouTube. There'll be a link in the description below. So learning chord progressions can be tough, but I know if you follow this step-by-step process that you can get them down. Remember though, to have fun while you're doing this. Come up with your own strumming patterns, come up with your own chord progressions, maybe add a chord, take away a chord, and then try to learn a song and see if you can take this step-by-step process and apply it to the song. Now I hope to see you in the next video, but in the meantime, happy practicing.